he talks about different kinds of worldviews that people have. And so I put this all together, trying to understand why we got into the situation that we're in today with our culture and the destruction of the planet at hand with climate change and all of these other issues that are going on. And I came up with the idea that we can look around and see other people. We don't know why they're thinking the way they think. We think, well, maybe they're just insane. You know, do they really want to just go out and use up all of the resources? Don't they care about their children? Don't they understand that they can destroy the planet if they're not careful? Certainly, they don't have any morality. Maybe they're a subspecies or something that just doesn't have any kind of moral basis or moral compass. Maybe they don't understand the implications of their actions. Maybe it's all about money and power and greed. I mean, the fate of all our mankind is in the hands of fools. This is kind of where I got the title, In the Hands of Fools. And so, going back to Dandy Sheehan's work, he explains that there are 4 basic questions that we can answer. And if we look at each of these questions and answer them, that will give us some indication of where we fall on our political and moral spectrum. Now, your particular worldview might not line up with anybody else's worldview. There are not an infinite number of positions, but there are a large number of positions that people can take based on their morality. And so there's a very bright fellow, a Harvard PhD named Talcott Parsons, who he originally developed the bar graph of the left-wingers and the right-wingers, the continuum in between. And so by answering these 4 pillar questions, and he interviewed hundreds of thousands of people and had them answer these questions to develop his graph. And so the idea is that if we answer these 4 questions and they're consistent, then we can identify what moral basis we have and where we're going to fall on this political bar graph that goes from the extreme left-wingers to the extreme right-wingers. The 4 questions are pretty basic questions. One of them is an ontological question. Ontology has to do with our beliefs about how the universe can exist at all. I mean, why is there something here rather than nothing? Why isn't there just a big vacuum someplace? When you think about it, the universe is a pretty big deal. Where did it come from? How did it get here? Was there a giant bang that happened in some random spot, and this is where we came from? Is there a God somewhere that just decided to create everything because he was bored? Is there some kind of a system that continuously brings energy and matter into the universe and then takes it away somehow, so it's eternally replenishing itself? Is there a steady state that's just going to stick around forever? What is it? This is the cosmological question. And if you can answer that question, then you're a better guy than I am, I guess. But it shows where you are in this continuum. The second question is a teleological question, which means how to understand how the universe is unfolding. Is there a plan or a purpose to it? Is there some kind of destination or progression in the unfolding of the universe? Is it just pretty much random? Is there a morality, or are there like 10 commandments that make sure that we stay in line? How is it that the universe unfolds? That's the second question. The third question is ontological in nature. Given the first 2 questions, the cosmological and teleological foundation of the universe, how did consciousness come into being? How do we develop our view of the world? Do we just have 5 senses? Is that it? that all there is? It's reductive materialism. Is that the world we live in? Are there more than five senses that we just don't know about or can come into contact with but haven't been codified yet? Do we have access to like the Akashic records or something? Is there a bunch of information out there that we can get somehow? Is there a universal intelligence that we can connect with? Is there a God that we can connect with? The whole idea is, how did consciousness come into being and what can we do with it? Right. The fourth question is epistemological in nature, and it has to deal with what is it possible for us to know? The ontological question is, what is out there? Okay, and the epistemological question is, what can we as humans know? I mean, are we limited to these five senses? Is that all we can know? Or is there more information out there? How are we supposed to figure out how the universe works based on, our limited amount of information? What's knowable and what's not knowable? And these are very important delineations, especially if you're a scientist. Is it possible to go out and talk to some ETs and find out what they know and how they came about knowing it? What's knowable and what's not knowable? So Dr. Parsons was able to come up with the idea that if we can answer these four questions, and if they're consistent in some way, if they make sense in terms of all the other questions, if each one of the four questions makes sense in terms of the other four questions, then that gives a very consistent and specific worldview. Okay? So then you can answer questions like, should we have the death penalty or not? Or should women have the right to vote? Or should abortion be illegal or not? Whether we should let people build in watersheds, or on the coast where they're subject to storms. You can answer questions like this. Should we have equal rights or not? These are basic questions, and they're all based on this moral basis that we have, right? It comes, now the four questions are not going to form these moralities, but they're an indicator of what we're going to decide, what kinds of choices we're going to make in the future. And the interesting part is that they also indicate where we fall on the political spectrum. If we're going to be, far left-wingers or the far right-wingers. Okay. Well, Parsons kind of clumped everybody into seven different categories in his political spectrum. And on the far right hand, he called them the right systematists. Okay. They're the pretty much. Well, I'll just continue. And then there are the right marginalists, which don't get far. They're not as radical as the right systematists. And then there are the conservatives, the normal, typical, dyed-in-the-wool conservatives. Then you have a centrist position, which he called the middle marginalists for some reason. And then the liberals are just to the left of the middle marginalists. The left marginalists are a little further out there. They correspond with the progressives. And then, of course, the left systematists are the utopians, the idealists. Interestingly enough, when Parsons developed this graph, he used colors and color charts, and he used the infrared to describe the right, and ultraviolet or violet to describe the left. And the higher the frequency goes, the more to the blue we shift. And so it turns out that the colors he happened to use on his chart originally corresponded to the colors of the different chakras that we have. You've all heard of chakras, right? Okay, definitely adamant about that. Okay, so the right systematists correspond to the infrared, and then the right marginalists are the red, and then conservatives are yellow, the middle marginalists are green, liberals are blue, and the left marginalists are indigo. Left systematists can be called ultraviolet. Well, interestingly enough, they also correspond to the notes of a scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. You can set it up that way. You can visualize the increasing frequency of notes as well. And that's another nice way to keep track of this. Well, Parsons would correspond to different shells of energy that we have around us. These fields actually filter the information coming in so that what reaches us, what comes into our center, corresponds precisely with what we believe already. We're not going to change our beliefs or anything based on the information we get. What happens is we see the information coming in, the filters form and shape all of this information we get so that it just reinforces our existing beliefs about what we already think. And so we know that our opinions are correct. We know that because the universe keeps telling us the same thing over and over again, that we're exactly right. And who are these other people? They must be insane. They don't know what they're talking about. They can't have any moral basis for what they're saying or what they believe. You know, their political ideas are way off base. They don't have any clue of what's really going on. And so they don't have common sense. They must feel some kind of entitlement. You know, they must feel like it must be all about the money. They must be just greedy or want to get grant money or whatever. And we get back to the same position. The fate of all mankind is in the hands of these fools that control everything. People don't even consider anyone else's view as being valid because they're convinced that they're right. They know because they've got all of these basic answers. They don't realize, though, that their basic core opinions about the universe they come from science. What science tells us, there was a big bang and everything's rushing away at increasing velocity and it'll eventually end up nowhere. Everything's disappearing and slipping away. They're taught by their parents, by the churches, by TV, there's psychology, there's the wet matter up here that affects them in different ways, bad chemicals in the brain, whatever. And who knows what else affects people and what they think, but they get these filters, and everything that comes to them goes through the filters and helps support what they believe already. But let's take a look at some of the positions. For instance, the extreme authoritarians, clear on the right-hand side of the spectrum. They believe that one person should be in charge because a king or a president or something like that. And, there should be laws to make sure everybody follows the laws because they see the universe as coming from this one big bang, one event. Apparently they think that 13.7 billion years ago, all of the matter in the known universe was space the size of a pinhead. And then in less than a microsecond, it inflated to 300 million light years, 300,000 light years, that's what it was, in just a fraction of a second, a millisecond, microsecond, whatever it was. It expanded. And then everything is just going away, it's spinning away, discorporating, and the laws of entropy are taking over, and everything will dissipate into this cold void where there's no motion, and no consciousness, and no life at all. And so they see everything is slipping away from them, and they want to control everything. And they're thinking, well, if we just have laws and order and discipline, then at least right now we can be safe. This is why they believe in authority. If you disobey authority, then by golly, you should be punished harshly. This is why we have a retributive justice system. Our justice system right now goes after revenge. If you break the law, the state will pursue you and hunt you down and drag you back and punish you. This is what we have for the laws right now. This is no accident. Actually, this is the root chakra. It's no accident that it corresponds to the anal area. Then as we move up the spectrum, there are the right marginals who are just a little bit better. It's no accident that they think that there are good guys and bad guys. They may not have any kind of religious convictions at all. The right-wingers are typically atheists. They think that the church might be good, that religion might be good because it'll help keep people in line. It'll help them from breaking the rules and harming everyone else. But the reactionaries, they think the world is made up of good guys and bad guys. And there's this dialectic that goes on that there's an idea, a thesis, and then somebody comes along and tries to destroy it with an antithesis, an antithesis. And then they merge together and there's conflict and combat. And then some kind of a synthesis merges out of that and changes the whole thing. And then another one comes along. Another antithesis comes along. And that merges and there's more conflict and more death and destruction. It's all made up of good guys and bad guys. And so we have to maintain this balance. And if there isn't one, you make one up because we might as well make profit while we're at it. It doesn't matter whether you destroy 1 million people or 10,000 people when you're doing it because, we'll just have more people anyway. You can't get rid of all the people. And then the conservatives are next, a little bit higher frequency on the spectrum. They make up the mainstream Republicans who pretty much make up the majority of the dogmatists and the scientists who believe in reductive materialism. We have 5 senses. That's it. And any more, if people who claim they have more senses, they must be just crazy. Or we would ridicule them, not believe anything they say because they're just insane. And then the moderates, they're the middle people, controlled by the heart chakra essentially. So they're out there wondering why everybody can't just get along. Why can't we just get along? Let's all get together and play cards or something. And then we'll be able to work out the differences. The liberals then tend to believe that people should be free for some reason. I don't know why. They think we should all be free and be able to do what we want to. The progressives are kind of like the liberalisms, except for they're a little more radical. They're adamant. We've got to be free. We've got to change the political system to make sure everyone can have their needs met because we're connected. The progressives like the notion of quantum mechanics because it shows that we're all connected somehow. Some of these ideas that come up say, oh, well, there's no real cause and effect. There's no real, if you look at quantum mechanics, you see all kinds of weird behavior in molecules and atoms and things, how they can become entangled if you bounce photons or atoms off each other. But they like this idea. They're the ones that are typically promoting the idea that we're all connected somehow. And then the utopians who believe that every one of us, even the radical right and the middle people, we're all connected. Not only that, we're all integral to the system. We have to have all of these people and all of these viewpoints and to make any sense out of the universe. They go a little bit further and say that they're typically theists, but they have a different way of looking at theology. For instance, the conservatives, if they believe in God, or the right marginalists, if they believe in God, they usually think that God is an authority figure, sitting around on a cloud with a white fluffy beard or something, commanding people to obey. But the conservatives tend to think of God as a noun, somebody, a person. Right? But the utopians tend to think of God as a verb, as action, as creation. So they'll look at the universe and say, well, the universe is actually constantly being created and constantly being destroyed. It's a self-perpetuating eternal system of energy coming in and going out. So God tends to be connection and working out and a verbal sort of relationship between different things. And so each one of these groups, each one of these worldviews has its own spiritual group. And I don't want to categorize anybody, so you could also look at these as political paradigms, which I may have mentioned before. It's interesting to note that the sixth political paradigm, which is indicated by the progressives, these guys we think are going to replace the fourth and fifth paradigm people, who are the centrists and the right marginalists, the conservatives, because of quantum mechanics, because of the new science coming in. The new science is popularizing the notion that we are connected, that there's no real causal relationship. You can't say that this event caused that event because there's no real connection between any of these things. Objects don't exist until you detect them. For instance, if you look at a photon, you don't really know where the photon is until you detect it, and then that waveform collapses into an actual entity that you can then identify. So nothing exists until you actually look at it and detect it somehow. So they're going to take over from the fourth and fifth political paradigm people eventually. There's also the sense that we have more ESP connections than we thought before. We're all connected to each other in that way. That this is another sense, and that we've just been limited by the conservatives and by the authoritarians because they don't really have access to any of these higher states of consciousness. And so, because they're in charge, they were able to suppress these abilities in the rest of us. So the idea is that we're going to be able to develop some of these other senses that we have. And not just consider them as spooky science and ridicule the people who have them. Hopefully, though, the fourth paradigm, the scientific positivism, this dialectical dynamic that I was talking about, these guys think that there's no absolute truth at all, just the thesis and the antithesis, and so that these people hopefully will be overcome and replaced by a more connected universe. And so it's really interesting to note that the seventh paradigm, the utopians, these guys think that the universe was folded into being, by some kind of universal consciousness that not only connects us all, but is us all. We're continuously replenishing ourselves and growing. And so, this was kind of the presentation that I wanted to talk about today. And one more idea, that instead of just having 7 chakras and 7 energy centers, we have an 8th energy center that is being developed and discovered right now. The chakras that we know are all in the body. Crown chakra is the 7th, but there's another one. It's right up here. The 8th energy center. And it's an octave above our lowest energy center, because we all know the notes of the scale: do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and then they go back on the top. This is an octave higher than our consciousness. And if you've talked to extraterrestrials or know about that kind of consciousness, we can have connection with the next octave of consciousness. It's said that ETs operate on these higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of frequency of being, and so that this is where they start, and they go from there. In order to contact our consciousness, they have to drop down into the lower realities. And so hopefully in the future we can learn how to use our consciousness